On the brown hills beyond Jericho stands the Greek monastery built on the slope of Mount Quarantel. It was here on this mount that Jesus fasted for 40 days and was tempted by Satan. This monastery is built like an eagle's perch on the top of the mountain. Here, Christ resisted Satan's offer of the whole world if he would bow down to him. In Jericho is a place known as the Russian Garden. The grounds here are fertile and beautiful, yielding apples, oranges, grapefruits, pistachios, eggplants, and many other fruits and vegetables. They are then sent off to feed surrounding monasteries. In the lower level of the residence is a mosaic floor indicating an early Christian church on that site. On the wall is a fresco depicting Zacchaeus the tax collector in the sycamore tree. Trees such as this still grow in Jericho today. This one is exceptionally large in comparison to most trees which grow here, so it is probably very old. The Sea of Galilee is sometimes referred to as the Lake of Galilee, because it is not as big in size as many well-known seas. However, its waters are very deep and often extremely rough. Its waters are fed by the melting snows of Mount Hermon and descend to 212 meters below sea level. The sea is 12.5 kilometers wide and 22.5 long. Rising from the valley and running west to the coastal plain are 3 parallel and rising steps: the plain of Esdraelon, the lower Galilee of hills of up to 600 meters, and the plateau of the upper Galilee of up to 1,300 meters. In the valleys of Galilee, the people enjoy great and fertile farmlands and plenty of water for corn, flowers, oil, wood, and some hot springs. All these features, including great highways and the considerable population, surrounded the blue tropical sea. These were the conditions under which Jesus taught and worked, and under which the numbers of his followers began to grow. Capernaum was the center of Christ's Galilean ministry. It lies on the northwestern shore of the Sea of Galilee and is one of about 9 cities that existed around the sea during the time of Christ. Here he met Peter and Andrew, who left their fishing businesses behind to become apostles of Christ. Another town on the Sea of Galilee is Tiberias. It is located on the southwestern shore. This city is not mentioned in any of the Gospels, probably because the local Jewish population despised the artificial pagan atmosphere of Herod Antipas's Oriental court and capital. But people from this city probably traveled to the neighboring cities where Jesus preached. Here in Tiberias, a Greek Orthodox church is dedicated to the apostles. Located on the western shore, halfway up the sea, is Magdala, the city of Mary Magdalene or Mary Magdala. Here is the Russian church dedicated to the apostles. It is situated on the bank next to the water. This is the site of Mary Magdalene's well, which empties into the Sea of Galilee. According to the Gospel of St. John, there was a wedding at Cana in Galilee. The Mother of God was there. Jesus was also invited along with his apostles. When the wine ran out, he produced his first miracle. He turned the jars of water into wine. When the steward of the feast tasted the water, it had become wine, and he knew not from where it came. And so he approached the bridegroom, saying, "Every man serves the good wine first, and when men have drunk freely, then the poor wine. But you have kept the good wine until now." It is tradition for some pilgrims to take wine home from this area, to be used as wedding wine during their marriage or someone in their families. Jesus' famous Sermon on the Mount took place on what we call today Mount Beatitude. It was here that Christ taught in parables, preaching about earthly treasures, love, and demonstrated the Lord's Prayer. At the foot of this mountain, Christ performed another famous miracle mentioned in the Bible, the multiplication of the loaves. In the waters of the Sea of Galilee, Christ taught Peter an important lesson in faith. He had gone unto a mountain to pray, and had sent his apostles by boat to cross the sea, when the waves stirred up, and they were frightened. Suddenly they saw Jesus walking on the water toward the boat, and they thought he was a ghost. "Take heart, it is I," said Jesus. Peter answered, saying, "If it be you, call out to me to come to you." And so Jesus called him to come, but Peter was afraid of the terrible wind, and cried, "Lord, save me." And Jesus said, "O man of little faith, why did you doubt?" Jesus then calmed the seas, and those in the boat worshipped him, saying, "You truly are the Son of God." Mount Tabor is known as the place of the transfiguration of Christ. It is dome-like in appearance, and is the tallest of all the surrounding hills and mountains. Standing on top of Mount Tabor, we can see why Apostle Peter loved its breathtaking view of the land of milk and honey. After seeing Jesus turn to glimmering white and witnessing the appearance of Elijah and Moses, Peter wanted to build 3 tents for them to live in. Here, this stone marks the actual site of the transfiguration of our Lord. It is no surprise that in the Holy Land there would be monasteries and convents, live examples of people dedicating their lives to God, and in some cases protecting the holy sites with their traditions for centuries. This is the monastery of St. Gerasim, located on the west bank outside Jericho. This present-day monastery stands like a fortress in the middle of the desert, surrounded by nothing but flat, stony sand, and is built over the site of a previous one known as the Lavra of Kalaman. Saint Saba lived here before founding his own monastery in the Kidron Valley. The church here is dedicated primarily to Saint Gerasim. He was an outstanding monastic who built monasteries and formed strict monastic communities. Once during his travels, he met a lion with a splinter in its paw. Having pity, he removed the splinter, cleaned the wound, and the lion stayed with him to serve him. This act of compassion is depicted in his holy icon. On the first-story level of the complex, there stands a church dedicated to the Holy Family, for they spent the night here on their flight to Egypt. The monastery of St. George the Hazabite, or the Greek name Kazaba, is near the ancient route from Jerusalem to Jericho. This 3-storied complex is situated on the steep cliff of Wadi Kelt. There is a main church dedicated to the Holy Virgin, along with cells, chapels, hermitages, and more. The cave church of the prophet Elijah is the place, according to 1 Kings chapter 17, verse 3, where Elijah lived in hiding and was fed only by ravens. The most famous and oldest monastery in existence today is Mar Saba, or the Lavra of Saint Saba. It is situated on the plumaging bank of the Kidron Valley, in the wilderness between Bethlehem and the Dead Sea, and about 15 miles from Jerusalem. Its uninterrupted history as the most important monastic complex in the Judean desert and all of Palestine adds up to around 1,500 years. It features the tomb of Saint Saba, the tomb of the 500 martyrs, and the tomb of Saint John the Damascene. This monastery has never been open to women, and today it remains the same way. There is, however, a stone-carved staircase that women can descend to get water from the spring, but it is not actually inside the monastery. Through the years, this lavra has survived numerous attacks and scourges, but as you can see, the monks keep it tightly secured and have defended it with their lives. It has always managed to survive, and they are forever thankful to Saint Saba. The water supply for the entire monastery comes from this tiny spring. The water is slowly collected into bigger pools and used for drinking. Next to Mar Saba in the desert is the monastery of Saint Theodosius. He was born into a pious and well-respected family in 424 A.D. Due to his family's stature, he soon became a great personality as his good looks, gentleness, and activities brought him leadership in the Cenobitic community. This monastery sits on the outside of the desert east of Bethlehem by the ancient main route through the wilderness of Judea and the Dead Sea. St. Theodosius built his monastery on a high plateau from which one can see Bethlehem, Jerusalem, the Mount of Olives, the River Jordan, the Dead Sea, and Mount Temptation. St. Theodosius strongly believed that the life of monks should not be based on only the pursuit of spiritual perfection, but on hard work as well. He combined monastic life with education, and monastic exercise with love to fellow man. This monastery, which he founded, was a rapidly growing and extremely functional monastic center, with a school for monks, an orphanage, hostels, churches, and more. The monastery functioned at its peak from 465 to the year 700, educating 3 monks who became pillars of its success, John Mascus, Modestus, and Sophronius, who were also buried here. On the grounds is a cave which was discovered by the founder as a place where the 3 wise men stayed. It has been used for centuries as a burial tomb, and is also the ancient tomb of St. Theodosius. The Persian invasion and the Arab conquest split up all the monks, and the monastery struggled for survival until the 15th century. For 400 years it stood, desolate and abandoned. The Greek Orthodox Patriarch of Jerusalem bought the property in 1858 and established a rebuilding program to make it operational again. The Monastery of the Holy Cross is probably one of the most interesting places for all Christians. It houses the actual place where Lot planted the tree from which the cross was made. Behind the main church, there are beautiful mosaics on the walls showing how the tree was planted, fed, and grown. Next to the mosaics is a hole where pilgrims can touch the true place where the tree was planted. Archaeological evidence dates this monastery back to the time when Palestine was part of the original state. In 614 A.D., the church and the monastery was destroyed by the Persians, but then rebuilt by the Patriarch of Jerusalem. In the year 1007, it was destroyed again along with many other churches in Jerusalem by the ruler of Egypt. It was then restored by Prochorus, the Iberian monk from Mount Athos. The kings of Iberia or Georgia gave generous donations to rebuild and beautify the church and its surroundings, much of which still survives today. In Lida, the present-day Church of St. George was built in 1893 over the ruins of a Crusader cathedral. St. George died a martyr's death in the early 4th century, and his tomb is now in the crypt below the church. Also in Lida, there is a lovely, massive Russian church dedicated to St. Tabitha. Tradition teaches us that Tabitha was a faithful disciple of Christ who had died and was risen from the dead by Apostle Peter. The maritime city of Caesarea lies north of Tel Aviv about 25 miles on the Mediterranean Sea, the Roman capital of Palestine, and later an important center of Christian mission. The Roman procurator had his headquarters in Caesarea from 6 A.D. to the fall of Jerusalem in the year 70. It was from here that Pontius Pilate moved to Jerusalem during Passion Week. During Jewish feasts and celebrations, the Roman governor would move to Jerusalem to keep peace and have military soldiers at his disposal. There was a vast harbor with large stones protecting it and enormous aqueducts along the northern shore. There was also a cornerstone with Pilate's name on it. There is an Arab girls' school in Bethany. It is under the auspices of the Russian Orthodox Synodal Church and is staffed by the nuns from Gethsemane Convent. It was built by a Scottish noblewoman who converted to Orthodoxy, joined the Russian Orthodox Church in Palestine, and served the Arab children unselfishly. The school was built on the site where Mary and Martha sought Jesus' help for Lazarus. Some girls reside here, others come every day but live at home. There is a church and a cave chapel where they pray. On the school grounds stands a small chapel that houses a rock with an inscription which says, "I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me, though he dies, yet shall he live. John chapter 11, verse 25. It was found during the excavation to build the school, and the nuns from Gethsemane have been running the school ever since.